I think most would agree that change is crucial. That as Christians, we need to not only accept it, but pursue it. We need to go out of our way to figure out how we can change and grow. However, if we as Christians decide to challenge ourselves and live a life in pursuit of God, what do we need to do? It's easy enough to say, I'll change, I want to change. But then how do you do it? What are you supposed to change about yourself? And so I've just composed a list. This is my list. I didn't find this in a book, but it seems kind of good to me. So I'm going to give you some of the things that have worked for me, that have challenged me in my life when it comes to change. Number one is pursue knowledge. We come to church, so many Christians come to church or go to Sunday school or go to a small group and say, I'm learning, and unless they're being taught something, they're not going to learn anything else. But we have to actually pursue knowledge. We have to go out of our way to find and to learn more. You see what I mean? We can do great things, but we also want to know and learn and grow in that. And so how do you pursue knowledge? This is like a subpoint. Number one, if you have not joined a small group, this is a great way to pursue knowledge. It puts you in an environment where other people who also want to learn. And you can dialogue, and it's a great thing. And also it creates fellowship. And so it's a simple thing that if you have not joined a small group, it's an excellent way to pursue that knowledge, to grow, to stretch yourself. And so if you have not made a New Year's resolution, and you haven't joined a small group, this would be a good one. Number two, read a book. And I know this sounds so simple, and I probably wouldn't have thought about it unless there's a student in our youth group named Jamie McAfee. Is she even here? Oh, there she is. Jamie came up to me one day, and she's like, do you have any books that I could, do you have any books that I could read that would be good? And I thought, no one has ever asked me if I know of any good books. And I thought, yeah. I mean, I got a ton of books on my bookshelf that you wouldn't want to read at all. But I know which ones they are. And I can tell you which ones you would want to read. And so the idea of, not only does she think, I want to go read something to learn and grow, but I'm going to ask someone who actually knows a little bit about this, and they'll tell me which ones they think would be good for me. And so sure enough, not only did she read them, but one of the authors that I gave, Don Miller is what his name is, but she got to read that and really liked it, and so he came out with a new book that I read, and she wanted to read it, and she still has it. So hopefully she remembers to give it back. But the idea of, she was pursuing knowledge in a very tangible, easy way, and a lot of times we think, well, I don't know what you go in a bookstore and you're like, what's good? I don't know if this is just some guy making stuff up, or if this is a popular book, or if it's just a fad. And so not only pursuing knowledge just to read a book, but finding out other people who can help you with that. And then the third way, on point number one, of pursuing knowledge is take a class. And this may not be as easy for some of you, and I say it because practically I take kids on a lot of trips, and there's always classes you can go to. But I know there's a lot of opportunities that you can go to, even in small groups. I mean, there's classes that are offered all the time. But when I found out that I was going to be preaching today, I knew that I wanted to do something about change and about growth because of what I've learned this semester, not only from this book, which has kicked my butt, but from a couple of classes that I took that are kind of taboo. There's a class that we went to at Oasis called, it was about politics, about God and politics, and it's very, I mean, you could just divide the room right now, like about what people believe, if it's in the same category, it's I believe this, I don't believe that. But it really got me thinking. I'm not going to go into that, but the one I am going to go into, which is also a big subject, was this idea of homosexuality and the church's response to that. And I thought, ooh, that sounds like something interesting. What are they going to say? And when Maeve and I went to Cincinnati for the National Youth Workers Convention, and this guy who was leading the class, actually, he taught a class. It was, I forget what it was. It was about homosexuality as well, but it was a different kind of topic. And then she's like, this guy's amazing. Let's go. You need to go to this class. So then I went to his class, and I still have the thing from it. And it was called Answering the Tough Questions on Sexual Identity. And so here's a quick background. This guy was a Christian guy, and he'd grown up in the church. It was just like most of you. And all of a sudden one day, one of his good friends came out and said that he was gay. And he's like, whoa, what do I do with this? Because all of my stereotypical thoughts that I used to have kind of went out the window because you didn't fit what I thought was gay. And then like a few days later, a little bit later, another friend comes out and says, hey, I'm gay, but don't tell anyone. He's like, what is going on? And then like a little bit later, a third friend comes out to him. And then it wasn't until like all four friends were hanging out and he realized they hadn't told each other. And for some reason, they all wanted to tell him, and he had no idea why. And so he just came out one day and he's like, hey, you're all gay. And so that was just a side note. And it was all weird for them. And so they were trying to wrestle with it and like, what does it mean to be a Christian still be gay? And it's a huge deal. I mean, even right now, you're probably wondering, what is he going to say? Was he convinced? Is this going to be... but this really, it really... I'll tell you what I learned. I wrote it all down here, so I won't forget it. So he gave us this thing, and he said, basically, it was the 5 most common questions you're going to hear if you're talking to someone who's of the gay, lesbian lifestyle. And he said, the 5 questions are, was I born gay? That may get right up to you. The next one is being gay a sin? Can I change my sexual orientation? Am I going to hell? Can I be gay and Christian? And I'm sitting here thinking, how is he going to fit all of this on a paper? Like, I'm writing notes. I'm like, we're going to get through all of this? And so, what is he going to say that's not going to compromise Scripture, but still answer these questions? And so what he did was, it was so stinking interesting. He says, what is the one thing that all these questions have in common? I had no idea. I'm like, they're all about gay people. And I didn't say that, but I'm like, I don't know. And someone's like, they're all yes or no questions. And he's like, that's right. They're all yes or no questions. Was I born gay? Am I going to hell? Can I be gay and a Christian? They're all yes or no questions. They're all closed-ended questions. And I'm thinking, okay, so what's your point? And he's like, they're all yes or no. And so if someone asks you a question, you're either going to say yes or no. And I'm thinking, well, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to compromise what I believe. I mean, if they ask me yes or no, I'm going to tell them yes or no. And he went on to say that it's the problem with closed-ended questions is that if someone says, hey, do you believe homosexuality is a sin? I'm like, no. And someone else is like, well, I do. And then bam, you're done. You've just successfully closed it. And now, basically what those questions are designed to do is to find out, are you on my side or not? Do you believe this, yes or no? If you do, you can come over here. If you do, you believe what I believe. If not, we disagree. And so what he said was, he was reading through the Scriptures, and he noticed a time when Jesus was asked a yes or no question. But Jesus didn't answer yes or no. And he thought, that was funny. Why didn't he do that? So he read through all the Gospels, and he marked down every time Jesus was asked a yes or no question. What happened? What did he do? And he noticed there was 25 times in the Gospels that Jesus was asked a yes or no question. And do you know how many times Jesus answered yes or no to the question? Out of those 25? 3. And those 3 times were only after he was convicted and on trial. And they said, are you the king of the Jews? And he said, it is as you said. Yes, I am the king of the Jews. After he was already convicted for that. And those 3 times were after he was convicted and on trial, are you the king of the Jews right there. The other 22 times, he did not answer with a direct yes or no. So what he was kind of talking about was if someone were to ask Jesus, hey, can you be a Christian? Can you do any of this? He probably wouldn't just say yes or no. And I'm like, well, how would you know what he would say? And he went through an example, and he said, he talked about what Jesus did and broke it down. And basically, I'll sum this up because I'm talking about it too long. But it's just so interesting. He said, when Jesus was asked the question like on divorce, is it lawful to divorce? Well, the answer is no, it's not lawful. You should divorce. But he didn't say that. What he said was Jesus elevated it to a kingdom principle. He got down to what really mattered and then turned the question back on them. And so, for example, he said, if the question is, if you're talking to someone with a gay or lesbian lifestyle, and they say, am I going to hell? Instead of saying yes, or instead of saying, I don't know, or instead of saying, you don't need to worry about it, instead of giving one of those and shutting the door, we need to stop, we need to look at it and try to bring it back to a kingdom principle. And so he says, if someone says, am I going to hell? Instead of answering yes, no, or maybe, you could say, well, how would you make your case to get into heaven? And what he did was he turned the question back on them and asked, what do you need to do to get into heaven? And therefore, they now need to look at, how am I living my life? Do I need to change? And maybe they say no. But he's turning it back on them and changing it to a kingdom principle. Instead of making you the one that says yes or no and then pushing them aside or compromising Scripture, it's challenging them to look at heaven. And it's challenging them to evaluate their own life. And it's challenging them to make that decision of what they need to do. Does that make sense?